Hello, good afternoon. Today is Thursday, October 19th, 2023. My name is Ashley Glover, and I'm here with attorney Tom Marasco, and we are happy to welcome you to our webinar, What Do I Need to Know Before Selling My Home? So, as usual, let's get warmed up with a few housekeeping items. This webinar is scheduled for 30 minutes. We put together a PowerPoint, which we are showing on screen along with our webcams. To help minimize background noise, your mics are muted, so please use the Q&A box to submit questions. We've saved time at the end to answer as many as we can. Feel free to chat with each other in the chat box. We are recording and we'll email you a link to the recording. And finally, we value your feedback, so please let us know how we did in the webinar survey. That survey will appear on your screen once the webinar ends. All right, now I'd like to introduce today's presenter, Tom Marasco. Tommy is an associate with Russo Law Group. He focuses on the areas of real estate and estate planning. He was selected by Super Lawyers Rising Star as a top-rated real estate attorney in 2023. For other useful real estate tips, please follow us on our social media pages and look out for our Tuesdays with Tommy segment, where he addresses things to know, what to consider, and common questions regarding real estate transactions. And we are on TikTok, Instagram, LinkedIn, and Facebook. All right. Thank you, Tommy, for being here. I will pass it over to you now.
Well, thank you very much for the introduction and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to be here with us today. So the goal for today is really to provide an insight as to what you can expect and how to prepare for selling a piece of real property. I really want to stress the importance of the preparation that goes into it at the very beginning, what we can do to make sure that we set ourselves up for success throughout the process, and then exactly what expectations you have of your attorney and what role they play throughout the entirety of this process. Go to the next slide. So the most heavy lifting in any real estate transaction is always going to be in the beginning. We want to make sure that we have all of the groundwork ahead of us so we can see the full picture, and that way we can strategize and develop an action plan that is catered to what we actually need with the most efficient way possible and the least amount of complications. So first is really just understanding the property itself. You could have owned the house for a couple of years or maybe a couple of decades. So some paperwork might need to be collected. Maybe you don't know where it is, or you don't even know where to start. So right from the very beginning, having the right real estate attorney on your side is going to be helpful, because they're going to be a resource that you are going to always go back to and guide you throughout the entire process. I'm not going to leave anything up to questions. Anything that you need to be aware of, they will help you, tell you what you need, where to go to find it if you don't have it. Okay, but the first thing is, who are the players involved, and understanding any other issues or anything else that we should be aware of before we get involved in selling the house. So let's take a look at our deed. Let's see if all the right players are party to this transaction. Are there any other things we need to be aware of? Is there a life estate? Is perhaps the property in a trust? Or is it a part of the administration of an estate? If so, are we speaking with the right people? Do we have the right approvals? Have the right contingencies have been met in order for us to be even allowed to sell at this point in time? So these are all things that we need to consider before we go ahead and put that stake for the for sale sign in the front yard. Okay. By setting ourselves up and knowing what's on the table, it's going to lead to greater success for the rest of the transaction, and also set us up so that way we have little delay or any other type of adverse impact to our transaction. So one of the things we have is having to know whether or not we have to have a broker help us in our transaction. And if so, we'll get into that in a minute, and the pros and cons of having to deal with that. But other things we want to be aware of, anything that could potentially impact even work that was done to the property. Was a permit needed? Did you get one? Was it closed out? Are there any violations? Is there any foreclosure? We want to know any and everything that could impact us so that we can get ahead of it from the very beginning, as opposed to in the middle of the transaction. And then other special things to consider. Is it a rental property? Is it a two-family where you occupy a part of it and the other part of it's rented? What are we doing with the tenant situation on that? So all of these things need to be dealt with before we can go ahead and say, yeah, let's put the house up for sale. Okay. So moving on from here, we'll talk a little bit more about brokers and the pros and cons and whether or not we need one. So the main thing is, yes, does it cost money to utilize a broker? It can. If we go through the transaction, you have a broker, yes, you're going to expect to pay commissions. And right now, the average is about 4%. All right, you can see anywhere between 4 to 6%, but that's kind of where it is right now. But what you need to consider is, what responsibilities do they have as the realtor that if you did not use them would now become your responsibilities? Is that practical for you? What are the time considerations? Right? Because right now, if you did have a realtor, what they would be doing is a market analysis, determining the right price for your property. How can we stage our property in the best way to appeal to buyers? Then they're going to be coordinating with all the potential buyers, coordinating walkthroughs, accepting and fielding all the offers. There's a lot of work that is involved in that. So you have to ask yourself, again, this is very specific. Do you have the time and resources available to dedicate to carry on all of that responsibility? If not, then it may pay to have that person there because they're really going to help you. And even in the market, it shows that you're more likely to get a higher offer when it's listed with a realtor than if you were to try and sell it on your own. But again, there might be somebody that you know personally. It could be that I know this person down the block. He's been there for years. He said that if I was ever interested in selling, he would sell me, to contact him first. Yeah, that could work out potentially. And maybe you don't have to get a broker involved. But if you're thinking that this is going to go to a third party, well, then it's definitely something you should consider. Again, part of a success of a real estate transaction is the team that you have behind you. So along with an attorney, also having the right realtor in place is going to help save a lot of headaches and time for you. Instead of you trying to have to figure out things as you go, you have the right team of people in place that are going to guide you and take care of that for you. So we've discussed how we can prepare, what kind of foundation background information we need, things to consider. So now we want to move forward with selling our house. So what do we do next, right? How do we get now our home in order? So we have to remember the first impression that you're giving to somebody when they're pulling up to this house is, can I envision this being my home? Right? Can I picture me settling and growing and putting down roots here? So we want to appeal to that, right? So we don't want any clutter around. We want to, maybe up the curb appeal a little bit. Maybe we can fix up some landscaping, fresh coats of paint. I'm not saying that we have to do any type of extensive work here, but little things can go a long way. Okay, even inside, you want it to be nice and clean. You want it staged so that when they walk in again, that they can envision themselves living there and making it that their home. And again, this is another part of having a realtor. What could be resourceful is that they know the market. They know what buyers are looking for. This is what they do. So they can even tell you, little tweaks that you can do that may not even cost you any money, but maybe a little bit of time, but it can make all the difference in how you're appealing to those buyers. And that could go a very long way. So it's something to consider. So now after all that, moving on, one last thing you need to consider is, who is our target audience when we're looking to sell? Now, the natural answer might be, yeah, whoever's going to give me the best value, right? Whoever's going to give me the highest offer. And that could be the case. But again, every situation is different, and you need to know what the circumstances of your particular property is. So now if you're someone who knows there are issues, permit issues, maybe there's physical, structural damage, things that you want to sell the property and not take any responsibility toward, well, to a contractor or somebody who's looking at it as an investment opportunity, who's buying it in cash and not relying on some type of an institution for lending, then yeah, maybe they have that flexibility. They can say, yeah, I'll buy it subject to those things, no problem. Now, you could find a willing purchaser who would be willing to accept them in the same circumstances, but if they're now relying on a lender for the funding, that doesn't necessarily mean the lender is going to be on board. They may not issue a mortgage. So now, again, this goes back to being prepared in the beginning, knowing what the circumstances are and knowing what we're looking for. So this goes into that strategy. So who am I going to market to? If I'm that person who falls in that category, if I have a lot of issues that I know are problematic and I don't want to dirty my hands, I don't want to spend money, I don't want to deal with it, I'd rather just be rid of it, even if I have to take a hit on the purchase price, it definitely beats having to try and take on that responsibility. That's fine, but you have to then maybe cater to a different pool of buyers, and it'll save us a lot of time. We don't want to wait till we're in the middle of a contract and we've given them a specific amount of time that they have to get a mortgage or get out of the contract. That could be 45 days and end up losing 2 months in our process because we just didn't screen the right circumstances for our facts and what we needed, right? So that goes into the as is conversation of, okay, how I'm selling something, what are the implications? What does that mean as is? Again, going back to being explicitly clear of your intentions and having that discussion with your attorney as what your expectation of as is. Because in a standard contract, as is pertains to the physical condition of the property at the time the buyer is doing their walkthrough. So if there's a hole in the wall, something's off the hinge, anything physically noticeably wrong with the property, if you're agreeing to buy it subject to and as is, you're talking about that. But that doesn't extend to mechanical systems of the home, heating, plumbing, electric. It doesn't extend to permit issues or anything of that nature. So if your intention is I'm selling this strictly as is, and I mean to all faults, then that's something that needs to be made clear from the very beginning. Okay, we don't want to go in between you and buyer having different understanding of what this as is means, and then we lose the deal at the contract because there just wasn't clear communication. So again, having that dialogue with your attorney early on, having them understand the circumstances and guiding you through this, they should make sure to navigate this in the contract so that way there is no disputes. Okay. And then other special circumstances that you need to consider for your situation. Are you looking to sell to purchase something new? And if you're looking to purchase, are you relying on the proceeds of the sale in order to fund that purchase? If so, that might mean, okay, I might need to stay in possession of the house for a little bit of time after we close, so I have the time to have the money clear and close on the new property. But again, these are all things that should be discussed at the very beginning. We don't want to wait until we think we have an agreement with somebody and then we start changing the deal along the way. That's what leads to delays. That's what leads to falling apart transactions and a waste of time and resources for everybody involved. So moving on, after we've been able to find the right buyer for us and accept an offer and we're in the contract, some other things that we should just be aware of, cognizant of, that could arise and hopefully we can try to avoid, but just things, again, to keep your eyes open for. Once we are in contract, the purchaser is going to be responsible for ordering a title report. Now, that title report is going to give a history on this piece of property. It's going to tell you everything you need to know, from open mortgages to open permits, violations, bankruptcies, judgments, anything that could negatively impact that title is going to appear on this report. Now, hopefully, if we've had that clear line of communication from the beginning and we are aware of a lot of issues that you were able to identify, then hopefully when we get this report, nothing is a surprise, right? Hopefully we've been able to identify these ahead of time and deal with them adequately so that when it does come up on a title report, we can nod to it, say, yes, we know, we took care of it, on to the next. Okay, but then there's certain things that you see a lot of that sometimes people aren't aware of. A couple of those things, easy ones, are an open mortgage, right? You might have paid off a mortgage 10, 20 years ago, but if the satisfaction wasn't properly recorded with the town, it might still show as open. And that's something that we'll have to deal with. Again, not always going to mean that it's going to cause a drawn out delay, but again, something that is common, such as boundary issues as well. So in addition to ordering a title report, the purchaser is most likely going to want a survey. And if they're working with a lender, they will require one. And now a survey is basically a map of the property, what the boundary lines should be according to the deeds description, but then they also plot out what's physically there now and where that's actually situated in relation to that boundary line. So they're looking at fences, bushes, structures such as sheds, garages, and where are they in relation to the boundary line? And sometimes we find that a fence or something else may be too far on to our property that it could cause a boundary line issue. Now, again, absent having a survey, you may not even necessarily know this problem exists, and sometimes these things come up. So again, if we wanted to be cautious in the beginning and you wanted to take that extra step and expense of ordering a survey to know whether or not it's there, we could do that, or you could try to negotiate having to a work around that in the actual contract itself. But again, the more you're prepared in the beginning, the more likely that this process is going to remain smooth, without hiccups, without delays, and best set up for success. Now, the other things to consider is that if you are selling from a trust or an estate, you have to make sure, one, you have all the documents for either of those two things, that it's been reviewed, that whatever contingencies were in place that actually allow the sale of the house has been met. Make sure that whomever the parties are that are contacting you are the actual parties who have authority under either the trust or the estate to be able to go through with the sale, and make sure if it's estate related, that you actually have the court's approval to move forward with that sale. Again, so these are just things to just be mindful of. But again, if you have the right attorney in place, this is stuff that we'll be reviewing throughout the entirety of the process. So again, it's not going to be the first time you see it in the transaction, but just something to think about. So going through this, we've already been discussing what role the attorney has and the different ways of different expectations you should have of an attorney in this process, what they should be doing, how they should be interacting with you, what they should be guiding you with. So in addition to that, of course, yes, we're the ones who prepare the contract of sale, but there's a lot that goes into that contract. All of that preparation that we did, all of that gets cultivated into the contract and is reflected in there. So that way, again, there's always that clarity. We're the ones who are going to review the title report, see if there's any other issues that we need to address and how we're going to address it. We're the ones who are going to attend the closing on your behalf, calculate the adjustments, and also handle anything that might have to be taken care of post-closing. Whether you're in that situation, as I mentioned earlier, where you might require to hold over on the property until you have time to find a new place, or if there's any other escrow that might need to be withheld for whatever reason, we make sure that we see that through to the end. And then at the end, we are supposed to prepare a closing statement outlining all of the details of the transaction, the fees involved, and copies of all bills and documents that you sign at that closing. So with that said, I hope today's presentation was able to provide you a good insight as to what you should expect as a seller and what you should do in order to prepare when you're starting to think of selling your home. Okay, that again, from the very beginning, when you made that decision that you want to sell, all the thought process leading up to getting that for sale sign in the front, and then how do we get into contract and through to a closing in a successful manner, and again, what your expectations of all the different parties are involved in the transaction. So aside from just selling property, us here at Russo Law Group are able to assist you in any of your real estate needs, whether that's purchasing, selling, leasing, residential or commercial. So please, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out and schedule an appointment to meet with one of us here at the firm. And now we would like to leave some time for questions. We have some that were provided, and I'll look through the Q&A box. I will try to get through as many as I can with the time that we have remaining. Please forgive me if I do not get to all of them. And if not, please feel free to reach out and we can schedule a call and answer those individually. So one of the questions that I received is, when should you start working on this? Immediately, right? The second you're thinking, I'm going to sell, or I need to sell, and I need to know what's going involved, that's the time that you should be reaching out to your attorney and just trying to, one, discuss your circumstances to get an idea of, okay, when do I need to start acting? When do I start making moves? And the rest of the process, and outline it for you. I received another great question about the as is that we discussed. So again, I just want to stress that what your expectation of as is should be conveyed to the realtor and to the prospective buyer so that everybody's on the same page. If you're saying as is, and I'm saying as it pertains to permit issues, non-working appliances, heating, plumbing, anything and everything, then that should be explicit. There should be no room left to even question what that means. Do not rely on just, we had a discussion, I said, we're going to buy it as is. And we said, great, we shook hands, and your idea of as is was different than mine. So it's a great question because it is extremely important and make sure that you're clear on that when you're speaking with your attorney. I had a couple of questions on capital gains. I'm not going to go too much into that because that could be its own seminar, but realistically, capital gains are a tax that are incurred on the profit of your home. How do they determine what that profit is? Well, I advise that you speak with one of your financial planners or CPA, whomever handles any of that work for you. But realistically, you have to establish what your basis in the property is, if you're entitled to any exemption, and then what the difference is between that number and the sales price. And then they have a fixed percentages of 10, 15, and 20%, depending on how much of a profit there is. I have a question here about, should a sales contract mention water seepage and basement? Again, extremely important. Whatever you identify as an issue or something that someone would need to know, this is the perfect example. How you put it in the contract and how you account for it is going to make all the difference. So should it be in there? I think it'd be a good idea, and especially depending on what you're saying, whether or not you're taking responsibility for it. Either way, though, that should be a discussion that is had. Let me see what other questions I have. I had one more about inheriting a home. Again, if you're working with a trust or an estate, it's extremely important that you know who the players are, and whether or not you've met the conditions to be able to sell that property. And then again, having the right legal team behind you to walk you through that process would be essential there. That's all the time that we had scheduled, unless anyone has any other last questions that they'd like to ask. I don't see any coming in. So with that said, I'm going to turn it back over to Ashley to just, just a little discussion on what makes us different here at Russo Law Group.
All right, thanks, Tommy. So our clients tell us that it's our dedication, accessibility, scope of legal services, and years of experience that gives them the peace of mind and confidence when working with us. Russo Law Group is a boutique firm focusing on the different areas of elder law, special needs, and estate planning since 1985. We have 3 convenient office locations in Nassau and Suffolk counties. Our firm has 11 attorneys. We've helped over 17,000 families and ranked as a best law firm in the area of elder law by U.S. News. We do invite you to join Tom and attorney Kim Christian for their next seminar on estate planning, protect yourself and your family at Stella's Restaurant in Belmore. It is on November 9th or November 16th. This event will include a complimentary lunch while our attorneys discuss the essential estate planning documents, long-term care and estate tax planning, and asset protection for your family. So you can visit our website to register. I will put the link to register for either day in the chat box. Give me just a second to shoot that over to everyone. All right, moving on. So we have a robust website at vjrussolaw.com. We offer terrific information, forms, checklists, resources, so take advantage of it. There is a complimentary planning guide on real estate. I would encourage all of you to go ahead and download that. And again, I'll put that link in the chat window as well if you're interested in visiting that page. In addition to real estate, here's a list of the services that we do provide and how we can help you and your family. As a token of our appreciation for attending today and submitting your survey, anyone who's interested in scheduling a planning meeting with one of our attorneys to discuss their estate planning needs, we will send you a voucher for $100 off of your meeting. All right, we appreciate all of you for joining us. Again, please leave your feedback in the webinar survey that will appear on your screen momentarily. And in case you missed any portion of today's webinar, we did record this and we will email you a link to the recording. If anyone has further questions, you may call our office. We are available to speak with you. All right, Tommy, I guess that just about does it.
Thank you all for your time and for attending. We hope that it was informative, and we hope to hear from you if you have any questions.
Be well and stay safe.
Take
Bye-bye.
care.